Okay, we're live.
Okay.
Oh, perfect. Welcome, Kelley and Billy from Green Juju. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for having us.
Oh, man. Are you guys both getting back from Super Zoo?
I'm not.
No, just me.
Last week.
She makes me go to events, so I'm just kidding.
Kind of like it a little bit.
How
Yeah,
was
that's true.
it?
It was good. There was got to meet a lot of stores and see friends and just kind of enjoy people in the industry. So can't complain.
Good. Good. Yeah, I've gone in previous years and I joke that it's a literal zoo, but it kind of feels like it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. But it's a nice kind of. It was nice to get back to it this year. After the last few years and to see people just really seeing some new things and enjoying each other and that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. Welcome back. While we wait for others to trickle in, I'll introduce myself. I think we've got quite a few viewers that are joining from your platform as well. So I'm excited to meet some new people in our audience. My name's Ruby. I'm the founder of Real Dog Box, and we're a small batch maker of air dried treats and chews. And we also do nutrition consultations to help people feed real food. I asked Kelley and Billy to join us from Green Juju today because we've been putting some research together on gut health, and veggies is a very important topic that seems to come up over and over again. So, again, thank you both for being here with me today. We're going to be going for about an hour. Just want to chat a bit. We had a lot of questions sent in from our Instagram audience. So everyone that's joining in right now, if you got some questions, we are going to do a quick little Q&A towards the second half of our live. Feel free to drop your questions so that we can answer those and play this live back later on our YouTube channel and also here on Facebook. So Kelley, you are the president and founder of Green Juju. I absolutely loved reading your story. I was hoping that you could share that with our audience.
Sure. Green Juju all started because of Bailey. Bailey was a yellow lab who I got when I was 19, and she kind of dictated the course of my life for the next 13 and a half years. When I started the dog walking business because I couldn't stand being at a desk job. And then about 6 or 7 years into that, Bailey was diagnosed with a rare joint tumor. And it was locally aggressive and slow to spread, but there was like 2 studies on the cancer. There was very few conventional options. And so my vet was kind of like, well, you have some time to experiment, basically. The traditional treatment was just amputation right away. And she was in really bad shape. I knew that she wouldn't make it through a big surgery like that. And so I opted to experiment. And I'd been doing a lot of work on my own health with whole foods and realizing that certain plants could have the same benefits as something in your medicine cabinet. So certain foods can, detoxify or have anti-inflammatory properties. And so I kind of had this smoothie like created for myself. And then I started looking at Bailey, and I was like, well, you have these joint issues. You need to detoxify. She had a big yeast issue because her immune system was so low. And so I just started applying what I was doing for myself to her. And through the guidance of a canine nutrition specialist and consulting with her conventional vet and her holistic vet, everybody was on board, and they helped me, tweak everything to make sure it was in safe for daily feeding amounts. And we went for it. So she was originally given 3 to 7 months if I didn't go through with her surgery right away. And between a raw diet and Chinese herbs and acupuncture and what became Green Juju, and gosh, so many different therapies that we tried, she was just thriving after 14 months. Like her coat, she had allergies since she was like 5 years old. So her coat was like shiny and her belly was nice and pink and her eyes were bright, and she was honestly the healthiest she had been in so many years. And she still had this tumor. It hadn't grown at all, but she wasn't able to use her leg because it was in her, like our equivalent of an ankle. So her leg didn't bend correctly. So she wasn't using her leg very well, but she was doing amazing. So we went ahead and we went through the surgery. She bounced right back, like literally pulled the vet techs out to go to the bathroom, and it was just boom off. And so she thrived for another 3.5 years. And she was a very happy tripod. She swam, she ran, she did all the things. So during this process, all of my dog walking clients were kind of curious about what was going on with Bailey, what I was doing. And I was like, well, this is why I'm doing it for her. I know it's safe because I've, talked to these nutritionists and vets. I don't know what it's going to do for your dog, but people are like, drop some off. So I would drop it off as I would pick their dogs up for the park. And people came back and they were like, my dog's shedding less. They have more energy. They're not as sore after the park. They're not eating poop anymore. Just a whole range of different things that I wasn't expecting. And this was almost 10 years ago. And so feeding, as you were mentioning, like feeding vegetables to dogs wasn't as much of a thing back then. Mm-hmm. And so this caused me to kind of dive into nutrition and research and figure out, what is this doing? Like, why are dogs shedding less? Why are they not eating poop as much? Like, how is this helping them? And what I learned was that it was providing dogs with so many different nutrients that they weren't getting from traditional diets. And through my dog walking business, these people would give me 8-week-old puppies and then go off to their 60-hour-a-week jobs. And I fell in love with these puppies. And I would see them struggle with these health issues, but I was the dog walker. Like, I wasn't a vet. I wasn't a nutrition expert or anything. And I wanted so badly to help these dogs in ways that I knew could help, but I wasn't, that wasn't my role. And so through Green Juju with Bailey, I found a way to make it really easy for people to add fresh food to whatever diet they were feeding. These people have intense jobs, 2 kids and a golden retriever. Like, maybe whipping up a fancy raw bowl isn't in the cards for them, but maybe they can scoop some Green Juju on top of whatever they're feeding, and that can enhance their dog's diet. So that was my goal in starting the business. My passion kind of turned from taking dogs to the park towards, how can I help get fresh food into these dogs' diets? There was a local pet store who was kind of like the dog walker depot, because she had the self-washes where everybody went on rainy, muddy days in Seattle. And she heard about this and convinced me to sell in her store. Or no, first she asked me for a sample. Mm-hmm. And she said she had an old sick dog and she wanted a sample. And so I'm, all for helping people. And so I bring her the sample. Then I call a week later and I was like, so how'd it go? And she's like, oh, actually, I don't have a dog. I have chickens and I sold the sample. And I was like, what? And turns out she sold the sample to Billy, who I knew at the time, but not like, we'd met once maybe. Mm-hmm. And so Billy just saw in the store, decided he had to have it. The people in the store didn't know what it was, so they just chose a random number and sold it to him. And
it was all a part of my plan to eventually become vice president of the company. So.
So she convinced me to start selling in her store. She sold out, and more stores started calling. And I, at that point, decided that I was going to make the jump from my dog walking business and give Green Juju a go. And now we have, I think, 1,200 stores across the country and 15 products. And I have Billy.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't realize that you had a history beyond the recent joining.
Yeah, we've been friends for a long time.
Yeah.
Part of the reason there was the joining. So
yeah. So tell me how that conversation went down.
I said to Kelley, if you'll have me, I would love to work for you and hopefully contribute to your vision. And luckily, she wanted that to happen.
What he first said is, hey, do you want to get coffee in Seattle? And I said, okay, sure. And he said, yeah, 3:00 Monday, whatever. Okay, fine. I'm coming to Seattle to see you. Why are you coming to Seattle to see me?
Yeah, we won't get into all the details of what we saw on the other end of that, but I'm very happy that it worked out and you found a partnership and you guys are here. You got a lot of fans here in our audience. We love Billy. He's a celebrity in the pet food industry.
I'll take it.
Well, let's jump into veggies. So for us, it has always been a very weird topic to talk about. I mean, we make food and we make all meat ingredients. And I have a very similar background story to you, Kelley, in terms of learning our dog was sick, cancer involved. And that was really what made me make the switch and, take this deep dive into nutrition as well. But why do you think veggies are so controversial in the raw feeding world?
Dogs need meat. There's no question about it. I am not an advocate for vegan diets, plant-based diets, anything like that. I am all for heavy organ meat-based diets. But I do think that there is a place for plants in dogs' diets because plants have so many different properties, so many different health benefits. I mean, the range is just so vast. And without that, you're missing out on so many things that your dog could benefit from. And if we go back to, historically, wolves are carnivores, right? Like if we're going to go that route, okay, they did eat some grasses and some berries and some of that stuff. But I take more of a modern day approach to it. And majority of animals are living in cities. We're living with a lot of pollution. We're living with a lot of toxicity in our environments, even in our homes. And plants can offer a lot of protective benefits from a lot of that stuff, helping the body detoxify in a way that it wouldn't otherwise, helping offer antioxidants that are going to help combat the free radicals the dogs are picking up from all the stuff in the environment. So I think that my approach for the necessity of plants is more of the modern dog, not from a historical standpoint.
Sure.
I have a theory as well on why maybe people were reluctant to add vegetables for a long time. And that's because, when dog food was invented and implemented, and still to this day, you basically, dog food exists in its large scale to recycle waste and subsidized plant ingredients like corn and wheat into somewhere so they don't go into landfill. So I have I don't know if you'd call it a pleasure to go to AFCO meetings, but I do attend them, and you kind of learn that very quickly. And so what I think happened was we used the wrong plants for so long for the wrong reasons. So you have ingredients like corn and wheat and soy, and they're using them for protein and fat, which is the wrong way to use plants just generally. Plants are not good at protein and they're not good at fat, but they are good at other things. And so what I think happened was we used the wrong ingredients for so long that when there was this movement to make more natural dog food, people said dogs are carnivores. They're not thriving on plants. So we swung in the opposite direction, but we probably swung too far in the opposite direction, because then there was a movement to say no plants in the diet. But there is no real debate anymore. There's you can look at the science and look at antioxidants and fiber and vitamin precursors and vitamins, and we know that they're beneficial, either way. I just think that we need to use vegetables for what they're good for the things that I just mentioned, and not, corn is not a valuable protein source, obviously. And so it's kind of, I think that contributed to where people were kind of hesitant, but we're advocating for using vegetables in a very, in the best possible way.
Well, I think it also depends on the processing, right? Because you will see, one of the things that really drove me to get into this industry was seeing the bag of food with a photo of a gorgeous piece of filet mignon and chicken breast and all of these other beautiful vegetables, but it obviously doesn't look like that when it comes out of the bags. So in terms of processing, we might see some of the popular processed pet food kibble companies come out with these ingredients, but what's your take on what's the optimum way to feed these veggies?
Well, for what we do, again, going back to this kind of argument of should dogs have plants. One of the reasons people say dogs shouldn't have plants is because they don't have the enzymes to break down plant cell walls, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what we do with Green Juju is that we juice the plants and then we blend them together. So what we're doing is we're breaking down those plant cell walls and essentially pre-digesting the plants. So by doing that, all of those nutrients are easily available to the dog, and so they are able to get all the nutrition out of it. When you don't do that, the plants aren't as valuable. Did that answer your question?
I think so. Yeah. I think a lot of, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, so, it's nice because in our blends, our Just Greens, Bailey's blend, and the Golden blend, we're extracting those nutrients through that juicing process and then adding the pulp back and breaking down the cell walls. And then in our new fermented products, we're extracting them. Essentially, we do grind them. We don't juice them, but we do grind them. But the fermentation process also helps to break down those nutrients. So you're kind of getting them in two different ways when you use the different products.
Yeah, we have a few people asking if all of your products are going to turn into fermented products.
No. We love fresh and fermented. That's actually kind of me and Kelley coming together, fresh and fermented. So
I love that.
There'll always be a balance.
Can you tell us a little about your sourcing and where your products are made?
Yeah, so we have a West Coast and an East Coast situation. We'll start with the East Coast. The East Coast is the raw goat's milk and our new fermented paste, so the Lua's Golden Paste and the Bam's Beets. Those vegetables are sourced from local farms, fermented, grinded in a facility, frozen, shipped out. The goat's milk comes to that same facility, gets bottled, shipped out. That's all in central Pennsylvania. And then everything else is made on the West Coast in Oregon. And so there we work with a local produce supplier that procures from small farms. And all of our proteins are sourced from various places, whether it's Alaskan salmon or our grass-fed beef comes from Washington. Most of our proteins are all in the Pacific Northwest, except for the bison, which comes from Wyoming or Colorado. So that's where they are sourced and made.
Well, and a couple notes, I think, on that. When it comes to meat, if you're sourcing to the quality level that we're doing, you do have to go to different parts of the country for in some of those cases, just because there's a finite amount of, grass-fed beef or grass-fed bison or, those things.
Sure.
And I did want to mention too, since all of the goat farms are local to me, I get the privilege of inspecting each one of them and making sure that the farmers are doing an amazing job, which they always are. So.
And he names the goats and pets them. And
I do pet them. I don't know if I can name them all.
Do you get to go visit the goats, Kelley?
I haven't yet, but I definitely will. It's coming up.
Awesome. Well, your product is certainly really convenient for people who do want to add fresh food into their diet. Do you have any advice for those who can potentially source some vegetables locally? What should they look for?
Like if they want to do their own?
Yeah.
I always go for low glycemic. So both of our greens blends are less than 3% net carbs. Again, this is because having a cancer dog, I didn't want to introduce any carbs. Our golden blend is 6% net carbs, which is still really low, but you're getting that butternut squash, which serves a good fiber purpose. So it's good in there. So when you're looking for your own stuff, seasonal is the best way to go. Anything that you can find seasonal and anything that is not starchy. So I don't like carrots or potatoes or really beans or anything like that. Leafy stuff is good. You want to watch out with stuff like spinach or chard because that has oxalates, and that cannot be good for the kidney. Kale, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, all of that stuff, that all goes into the cruciferous family. If you overdo that, that can have effects on the thyroid. We've been very careful to formulate all of our stuff so that those percentages are in safe for daily feeding amounts. So when you're doing it on your own, you just want to make sure that you're keeping an eye on those amounts. When it comes to, as long as you're staying in the low carb category, my thought is everything in moderation. Choose what's in season, use small amounts of a little bit of everything, never onions. Garlic is controversial. Some people think small amounts are good. Some people think no amounts are good. That's kind of up to your dog, their size, and their health condition to figure out. But yeah, seasonal, being able to find your own seasonal stuff is amazing. Even if it's just different varieties of kale, they all have different properties, different health benefits. So going to your local farmer's market and just picking out different stuff is great.
I love that you mentioned garlic. We did a post not too long ago, and both sides of the spectrum, commenting in on that. But something that has stood out to me is Dr. Connor Brady mentions in his book that it is medicinal, and dogs will self-select. So if they need it, they'll eat it, and if they don't, they'll leave it. And I have found in my experience, in the thousands of dogs that we have helped transition to fresh food, that happens quite often with veggies, my dog included. And I don't know if you guys followed our stories, but I tried a few different ways. And then the last one was like really mixing it in there. And but otherwise, he would steer clear of it. What are your thoughts on that self-selection and choosing not to eat what's in the bowl?
I'm for that. Oh, you want to go ahead?
Sure. Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I think that that's true to some degree, but then it also depends on the dog. I can say, not my current dog, but my last dog, Lua, was a pug, and I think she would literally select anything that exists that's on the ground or in the bowl. And I don't know whether that's, tied to breed or her personality just directly. So I think there is definitely an amount of that, but I think that people should kind of look to their own dog to see what you know your dog better than anyone else. And so I do think in some cases, some dogs, especially brachiocephalic dogs, will just kind of eat whatever. So
I think that there is if the dog has never had a vegetable before, never seen anything like it, I think there's an element of an introductory period, start slow, mix it in, work up. A lot of times dogs will be introduced this way, and then after a short period of time, you can just plop it on top and they'll eat it first. So I remember, I don't even know how long ago, I used to have a big thing for Diet Coke. Diet Coke, like there was a case of Diet Coke in the back of my car at all times. I probably drank most of it in a day. I don't even know. Then somehow somebody turned me on to green juices. Remember the first one or two I had, I was like, oh, slug it down. Okay. But then all of a sudden my body was just craving it. Like I would seek these things out. I loved them. And so I think I've seen that same thing happen with dogs at times. Once you introduce it into their diet slowly, then you can just plop it on top and they'll eat it first. If that happens with the dog, great. If you have a dog that you're trying to introduce it to and they're just not having it, then they know what they need. I wouldn't push it. But I think that sometimes it's just so novel that they're like, I haven't seen this before. I don't know what this is. Why is there a giant green thing on top of my bowl? So I think a proper introduction is important, but I don't think forcing anything on a pet is worth it. I mean, my dog lives on a beach and she eats dead crab, and my vet was like, well, she's doing great, and if that's what she wants to eat, that's what she wants to eat. Like neither of us really supported the act, but like she's self-selecting, so there must be something in there.
Right. Yeah, no, there's definitely some truth to that transition period. I think a lot of people struggle though because they feel like it's a must have, whatever it is that they're introducing. It's a must have in the diet and my dog won't eat it. What do I do now? They're going to die. Always, the worst case scenario.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like Billy said, every dog's different and they're all going to need different things. And I think at a certain point, we got to trust them and see what works well for them.
And I love that you use bone broth sort of as your base, which I think is really helpful. One question that someone on our team sent in was, is that like the different types of animal broths, was that intentional or for the specific blend or just to add variety?
So it's actually not the base. The vegetables are the base. The bone broth is a smaller ingredient in the blend, which is why we offer standalone bone broth if you want to add more.
Mm-hmm.
The veggies are the star of our blends. But yes, the reason we have different proteins is to cater to different dietary needs. Some people say that their dog or cat or whatever can't have hoofed animals or feathered animals or whatever it may be. So we wanted to have different options. And so between the just greens, we have bison, and the Bailey's blend, we have turkey, and the golden blend, we have duck.
Kenzie asks, what's Huckleberry's favorite Green Juju product?
Well, that's a good question. He was actually just chewing something below my feet, but now he's resigned himself to the couch, so he's very comfortable currently. That is a hard question. I would say probably the bison bone broth. That seems to be what he like really gets enthusiastic about. But I will say that he eats all of the Green Juju products without any coaxing whatsoever. In fact, tonight I fed him Lewis fermented golden paste. And I didn't mix it in with anything like that. He just eats it all. So it's nice at going from a dog that will, not be very picky to another dog that will not be very picky. So, but he's been on it since I got him and he's been doing great.
Can you tell us a little bit about the different benefits we can get from the fresh versus fermented?
Sure. Yeah. So you're really going to get, so for instance, like if you look at like Bailey's blend, which is one of our green blends, you can kind of get the fresh and fermented element of that because really we found out that after 8 days in the fridge on average, it's going to drop to about a 4 pH, and that's because of the cabbage as the inoculator and then the lemon as the acidifier. And so fresh food, we've kind of talked about the benefits of what that offers. And fermentation is really the breaking down of that food, but the opposite of like, decay if you left out fresh food and it went bad. And so what happens is the bacteria actually start to eat the sugars and starches in that food, and they kind of pre-process it. But what we find is that they're also pre-processing, a lot of the nutrients, but then they're also adding nutrients as well. So you have, new organic acids like acetic acid. You have new vitamins, and I'm missing something as well. But and then also you obviously get the probiotic benefit as well. And our products that are fermented are wild ferment. So even the Bailey's blend is going to be a wild ferment because you're not inoculating it with anything. So that's really cool because you get different sets of bacteria every time. And so like with our pastes, you're getting a wild ferment as well. So that what that means is all the probiotics are coming from the turmeric, the cabbage, or the beets in those cases. So it doesn't matter even if you're using different pouches from the same batch, you're going to get sort of different probiotics there. So that's kind of, you get that different profile from the fresh side of the profile where you would get, the naturally occurring vitamins, minerals, fiber that hasn't, been processed yet. So it's actually a really nice distinction to make between, for instance, the pastes and also the the blends. So, for instance, you'd use either BAM's beets or Lewis fermented golden paste to inoculate the gut, because those bacteria have already eaten the starches and the sugars in those ingredients. So you would add Just Greens or Bailey's blend or the golden blend to feed those bacteria, because those starches are not processed yet, or those although albeit low amounts of sugar are not processed yet. So they would be, or I should say, the natural fibers. So those are kind of like the two different benefits, where in terms of the bacteria, but then on the other side you get the different sort of nutritional benefits, because one is kind of processed by bacteria and the other is not.
Are there benefits that we might see right away, like very obvious ones?
Kelley, do you have any thoughts on that? I didn't know if you wanted to jump in or not.
On the last part you were talking about, I just wanted to kind of clarify the fresh blends have the prebiotics that feed the probiotics. So like he was saying, using them together, they're better together. And so in terms of benefits, which product are you talking about?
Well, so about a year ago, I did a hair analysis test for my dog Icon, and there were a few minerals that we thought we could boost by feeding fresh veggies, whether pureed or steamed, and those changes I would only see by retaking that hair analysis test. I probably wouldn't see it right away. So I'm curious if, like, with your customer base, people love your product because it's convenient, they love adding fresh food into their diet, but what might people who haven't used it expect to see different in their dogs?
I'm going to answer that. Did you do another hair analysis test? I want to do this.
It's on my list. Yeah, I am gonna do one, and I'm gonna do the animal biome test. I just had another lab. Yeah. Not yet.
Will you send me the link for the hair analysis test? I want to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So back to your question. I think that, yes, people tell us all the time that within a couple of weeks, like, their coats are softer, their stools are better, their breath is better, their energy is better, they're less achy. We hear stuff like that within a couple of weeks all the time. But I think the kind of preferred mindset is just to be, just like when we kind of tweak our diets and are like, I'm going to back off on the processed food, maybe add in a salad a couple times a week,
Yeah.
It's not because we're expecting in 3 weeks to feel this way. It's because we know that in the long run, this is better for us. So I think that's kind of the mindset, is just to like be improving the diet overall, rather than looking for this particular thing to happen in this particular amount of time.
Right.
But that is some of the feedback that we've heard. And we've also heard that when people, when they feed Green Juju, like, some people will start feeding Green Juju because, and when I say Green Juju, I mean one of the greens blends, they'll start feeding it because their dog eats grass. And they're like, oh, they're eating grass, they must be looking for some greens. So they start feeding it, and then they stop. The dog, while they're feeding it, the dog stops eating grass. They run out of Green Juju. The dog goes back to grass. So I think there's something to be said for that is meeting some need in those situations.
Are you aware of any documented science behind that?
Behind the grass theory?
Yeah.
Not behind the grass theory. There's, as I'm sure you know, there's a lot of science behind things that make money. And there's not a whole lot of science behind organic vegetables, unfortunately. There is one study that was done in 2005 at Purdue University that talks about cancer. You might be familiar with it, but it says that if you feed dark leafy greens just to your straight commercial diet 3 times a week, it reduces the risk of a certain type of cancer in a certain breed by 90%.
90?
90,
Wow.
yeah. And just no other changes to a bowl of kibble except for changing a third of that bowl to dark leafy greens. And then for if you use orange, yellow vegetables, same thing, 3 times a week, it reduces it by 70%. So that's one specific type of cancer and one specific breed, but that study does show that something's happening there.
But it was in 2005, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Here we are, over 15 years later.
I know. I'd like some more studies.
All right, we're gonna open up the floor for some questions here. We've got a lot of good ones. I have a few from my team that I wanted to drop in. Have you guys found whether or not the majority of your customers are kibble feeders or raw feeders?
I think the majority are raw. It's funny because I keep pushing for it to be kibble feeders because I want to be that baby step that gets people into feeding more fresh food. And so I think that's where we've like put a lot of our marketing and trying to get that crowd to just a little bit. And we just launched our Just Greens in a freeze-dried version, which I think will help people that don't want to deal with the freezer. Yep, there you go. So I think that will help people that don't want to deal with the freezer kind of tiptoe their way into that. But currently the majority is raw.
Well, you guys are both raw feeders, right?
We are.
No, absolutely not. I've never tried raw. I don't know what that is. If you could tell me about it, that'd be great.
I didn't grow up with a dog. So for me, the idea having a dog as an adult, going to the grocery store and picking up food that's in the same aisle as a laundry detergent was just weird. But for a lot of people, they had a much different experience growing up feeding kibble with their home dog. Was that the case for either one of you?
I mean, I grew up with black labs, like 2 or 3 at a time my whole life. We fed them something out of a green bag. I don't know, but they never had health problems. They lived long lives. Granted, I think a lot of that was environmental. We didn't live in the city. They ran, swam, played all day. They didn't have a lot of medications, vaccinations. Like they were just free dogs.
Yeah.
So I think that plays a big factor into it. I think that a lot of the environmental stuff is impacting our dogs, and food plays a role, but it's not the only factor. So, but yeah, definitely. I mean, my dogs were on kibble up until 8 or 9 years ago. And I saw just an absolute drastic shift in them when I changed. So.
Yeah, and I never had a dog or any real pets growing up. So my first experience was getting a dog in 2006, and that was really the first part of my journey. The first thing I ever heard about dog and animal nutrition in general was taking her into a store, not knowing anything about feeding dogs. And I looked at this bag of food and I said, well, this one has science in the title, so it should be pretty incredible. And then the person at the store said to me, no, actually the first ingredient should be meat. And that was the first thing I ever learned about nutrition. And I think I took the same journey most people do, which is to, feed kibble and then feed, a better kibble, and then, kind of moved up, and then here we are. But, I think a lot of us take that journey, and I think it's important.
Yeah, agreed. All right, let's dive into this Q&A. We're over halfway. I didn't even realize. Okay, which veggies contribute little or no nutrition? Oh, that's an interesting one.
I thought about this. It's so little to no nutrition. Everything has some nutrition. My first response to this question was going to be white potatoes. But then for some reason, I went to lunch today and they had this potato salad that just looked absolutely amazing. And so I got potato salad for lunch. And I remembered that if you cook potatoes and then you cool them, they actually have good prebiotic for your gut. So everything has something, but that's not to say that there aren't things I wouldn't feed my dog.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't feed my dog starchy stuff like potatoes, corn, beans, stuff like that. I wouldn't feed my dog stuff that's whole, like a chop of zucchini or a whatever. That's why we juice and grind everything. So we break down those cell walls, because when you don't break down those cell walls, the dogs aren't able to extract the nutrition from them. Really, it gives them fiber, but they're not able to get like those phytonutrients and those antioxidants and all that good stuff out of them. So everything has some nutrition, but how to max the nutrition in it is a different question, I think.
Sure.
Well, and I think too, you play the same game with every vegetable that you play with every food. So there are good and bad things about everything that you feed, yourself or your dog. It doesn't matter what the food is. And so in all those cases, all we're doing is saying, here are the good things, here are the bad things. Do the good things outweigh? Is it mostly good things? Do those things outweigh the bad things enough for me to use this ingredient? And I think it plays into something I hear in the industry a lot, which is this necessary? Which I think is sort of what are the necessary things to feed my animal? Which is sort of a weird way to ask the question, because we're looking for nutrients. And I would argue, when it comes to vegetables or anything else, there is no food that is 100% necessary in a dog's diet. It just depends on the dog. I'll give you an example of that. I've seen dogs thrive off of just raw milk and water for more than 5 years in some cases, and they were doing poor on meat-based diets. So for those dogs, the necessary thing was just that milk, right? Now that's not going to be most cases, and so I think when you're looking at vegetables in this context, you have to just look at that. And I think that's what Kelley did when she formulated these products. She said, here are all the benefits of kale and dandelion greens and putting these things together. And Kelley's told me many times, she put together these ingredients in specific ways because if you don't want to do too much kale, you want to mix it with this, and you want to do, all of these different things. And so, I think there's kind of a broader context to that, but and I think, so I would be in the same boat as Kelley with some of those things I probably wouldn't feed. And then the last thing I'll say is too, a lot of it has to do with processing as well. It's a good point Kelley, about the prebiotics once they're cooled down, but I wouldn't feed Huckleberry a French fry, but if I was making something with potatoes and it fell on the floor and it was like just a steamed potato, I'd probably let them eat it, right? And so I think that is a context is relevant as well.
Yeah, I think everyone in this room shares the same philosophy about variety and everything in moderation. I'm glad that early on we talked about not really recommending vegan diets, because that somehow is still a point of contention for a lot of people. But processing is a good point. Nicole asked, do you think dogs benefit most from veggies that are pureed or steamed or fermented, or how should they be processed?
So I think that pureed and steaming achieve the same goal and breaking down those plant cell walls. But when so what we do by juicing and blending is essentially pureeing. It's just in two different steps because it works better for what we're doing, but we can call it pureeing. But when you're steaming it, you are introducing heat, which is killing some of those nutrients. So we are fans of raw. We like to keep our veggies raw, intact. So if you're saying puree or steamed, I would puree. And then in terms of the kind of fresh or fermented, that's like what Billy talked about. I think it's good to have a balance of both of those. I think they serve different purposes, and you can even feed them together. So you could feed like our fresh just greens blend and then put some of the BAMS beets on top of it. Then you have the prebiotics feeding the probiotics. You're getting plants from two different directions. And with the beets, the cool thing about that is that beets are something I would normally put in the category of do not feed because of the high starch content and oxalates. But when you ferment it, you are bringing those sugar levels down to pretty much zero, and you're also bringing the oxalates down. So you get all those great benefits of beets, like the detoxification and the antioxidants, but you don't have to worry about the sugar oxalates. So I would do pureed and fermented together. That's my answer.
Daily?
You could. I would do, again, that depends on the dog and how they do. I would do greens daily. If they do well with fermented daily, I would do fermented daily. If they do well with greens 3 times a week, like, kind of got to figure out what works well for them.
Yep. Thoughts on bone broth for a dog with mast cell tumor?
I have only seen really positives in that, in the application of that. And so I don't know if the person's asking because of like a histamine issue there. I mean, people typically relate histamine to foods and mast cell tumor, but there's kind of a misconception there in terms of histamines in food in general. It also plays into the fermentation part of things with, should people feed fermented foods? You see that online a lot, that sort of thing. But histamines that are produced from mast cell tumors and histamines that are produced in food are two different things, and your body sort of does two different things with them. The best analogy I can tell you that I think makes it easy to understand is uh, lactic acid is a very healthy thing to consume, and is produced in fermentation and things like that. So when you work out, your muscles, kind of fill up with lactic acid and you get sore for that reason. That doesn't mean that when you eat fermented foods, you get sore in your muscles, right? Because those are two different ways and two different things. And typically, histamines are dealt with a system which is it's the MAO system in your body, or your dog or cat's body, which gets rid of any excess histamines pretty easily. And the same would be true for bone broth or fermented foods or whatever it might be. The only way that I've ever seen an issue with that, or I guess like looking at how the body works, there could be an issue, is if you were on a medication that's an MAOI, which I stands for inhibitor of the MAO system. So I would say, all that to say, I think you're good to go. So.
Did you want to add something to that, Kelley?
I agree.
Can Green Juju replace any supplements or vitamins that are required in a raw diet? That's a good question.
I will mention here, you can actually go onto our website, and we do have some nutritional analysis there if you click on that section of our website, and you could see some of the baseline nutrients in what we have going on, and apply that to a diet if you wanted to.
Yeah, I'd say that's the best way to go, because a raw diet can range so greatly in terms of what nutrients are there or not there. It's hard for us to answer. But yes, going online and checking out those documents would be the best way to go.
A question that I get pretty often, so I'm very fortunate to have access to whole prey, pasture raised, grass-fed animals here, and I feed the whole thing as is, and so I know that there's some of that pre-digested vegetation that's in their system. Do you, and I know, Kelley, you made a really good point, because we're talking about the modern dog who probably doesn't have a whole lot of access to the things that I do or our team. Do you guys think that for someone who feeds whole prey regularly, that they're getting the same sort of nutritional benefits that they would be if they were supplementing with your products?
Oh, can I just want to jump in, and I only say that because I feed whole animals and our products. So do you. We both do. I don't know why.
Ooh, Billy.
I do what I can. You can go first if you want.
Oh, no. This was important. Go ahead.
I just got really excited about it because I do this.
You feed whole prey. You do. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. So for instance, I just want to say Huckleberry had whole rabbit today with the fur, everything. They nothing removed. And I added just greens and Lewis Golden Paste to that, and some other whole foods. And so I think that the way that I build my own dog's diet is I first sort of build that puzzle with high caloric items. So our supplements are not going to be high in calories, but that doesn't mean that they're not significant contributors to fiber and antioxidants and all those things that we mentioned. So, I added a couple of egg yolks to that, and I'm putting together these higher caloric sort of animal foods. But we were talking earlier today, me and Kelley, actually, about adding some color to some of these dishes, and those colors are in the form of antioxidants and vitamin precursors and all those things. And so I think that they're very, very necessary in that, and in also the probiotic element of that, which you are getting some potential probiotic bacteria, and obviously some background microflora as well when you're feeding those whole animals. But I think that there's just no reason to remove whole aspects of food groups from your dog or cat's diet, for that matter. I know this is not real cat box, but for your cat's diet as well, based on some sort of like philosophical point, because philosophy is not nutrition, and nutrition is testable and works for your dog. And so hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah.
So also feeding a whole prey diet. We had duck today. I'll go back to what I said earlier, that I obviously passionately believe about this plant thing. So plants have phytonutrients. Phyto means plant. So these are nutrients that only come from plants. There are blue ones and green ones and orange ones and red ones and purple ones and all different colors, but they are all anti-inflammatory, all antioxidant, anti-aging. Some are antifungal, some are antibacterial. They all have these different properties. They only come from plants. One of the most, like we were talking about studies when I started early on, one of the most inspiring things that I read was Dr. Pitcairn's book on the Complete Natural Guide to Dogs and Cats. Mm-hmm. He was talking about how dogs can survive without plants, but they can only thrive with plants. Like they have to have plants to thrive. And it's because of these phytonutrients and because there's nothing else in the diet that can replace all of these things. So I think that might kind of answer the next question I see up on the screen, but that's why I think that they're important for the diet.
Yeah, for sure. I think when people ask questions like this for us, they just want to know what they're missing and if they're doing it wrong. And I think a lot of times, I think there's no harm in adding in fresh foods no matter what. Like they can only benefit from it. And I think that's sort of the same line of thought that you guys have. Let's see. I saw something here that was a good one. Where did it go?
Can I add in the meantime too, to kind of for your question that you had about whole prey versus, like, let's say a commercial raw diet that would have been like formulated through software or something like that. I think that, looking at the data I've seen, you can, one of the things I want to sort of express here is that every dog is so different from each other. So I think we get too stuck in like, well, the fat to protein ratio has to be this, and this is what we have to get for, vitamin E content, and this is what we have to do for, but it's just like people's diets are so different and it works for their body. So within that context of dogs are carnivores, I think there's some sort of leeway there. And I think the other thing that really helps meet some of those nutrient requirements as well is feeding properly sourced animals and properly sourced animal products. A good example of that would be So sorry, there's a dog crying right outside my window. So anyway, hopefully it's so a good way to sort of show you that is if you look at the USDA information on an egg, you have 44 IUs of vitamin D, which is actually relatively significant anyway. But from the data I've looked at in studies, pasture raised eggs or chickens that eat grass and bugs and are in the sunshine have 6 times that amount of vitamin D. So that's like 250 IUs per egg of vitamin D, which is a huge contributor to your dog's overall vitamin D content. So, and that's just in sourcing. So it does really matter that the rabbit that my dog ate today, it does matter that those rabbits are outside and are eating a natural diet, and that sort of thing. So I think that definitely matters, but you can definitely hit a lot of those markers, and that comes from, years of working in that space. So.
Yeah, for sure. I think as more and more people, I'm with you, Kelley. I want to be the stepping stone, right? I want to be like, you can do this. It's not that hard, and you just add a little bit at a time. But for a lot of people, that's one of the most intimidating factors is sourcing. And as a whole, we're really moving away from a lot of, I would think, factory farmed meats. But we're almost out of time, so I want to get to these last two. This is a good one. Okay, so how can we make the goat's milk product of yours lactose free? And perhaps the question is, why should somebody do that?
Well, if you actually go to our website and go to the raw goat's milk section, there's a video where I'll explain it, but there's a video where you can kind of reference that to make it lactose free. So we released pure goat milk in its pure form, so you could either feed it in its pure form, which is, it's important to remember that milk is the most complete food on the planet. Raw milk is, and milk is why milk is healthy. But you can bonus ferment our milk, or you can bonus sort of make it lactose free. So those would be sort of it would be good to do that if your dog was in the very small group of dogs that's actually lactose intolerant. So lactose is not just sugar, and especially when it's not pasteurized, because it's lactose B at that point, which is a little bit easier for the body to absorb sort of directly into the bloodstream as sugar. So it has other jobs when it's in its raw state. So most dogs, I just want to reiterate, are great with just regular raw milk in terms of doing that. But so if your dog is lactose intolerant, that would be an option. Or if maybe you're on a ketogenic diet because you're dealing with cancer, or you're just trying to reduce the carbohydrates, that would be another reason to do this. It's extremely easy. The brand that we looked at in our testing was called Milk Aid. And all we did there was for that, you just add 10 drops of that per pint. And what Milk Aid is lactase. And every time you, so lactase is an enzyme that breaks down lactose. And so all you do is add 10 drops of that Milk Aid and then shake it up and leave it in your fridge for 24 hours. And then you'll have 100% lactose-free whole raw milk. So you get all of the other benefits without the actual lactose content. So that would be a good option. And you could use any sort of lactase drops. That's just the one that we found to be the most prevalent. So,
is that the generic version of Lactaid?
This is just, I don't know if it's the generic version, but yeah, every time you go to the grocery store and see a lactose-free actual dairy beverage, they're just adding lactase to it. So you could find any sort of, because some of those things are a little bit different in that they're meant for humans to like eat while they are drinking lactose. This is something you actually add to the milk to be able to break down the lactose sugars.
And what about fermenting the product?
So the fermentation process is really easy. We did a lot with Adored Beast, their probiotic line. So take basically any probiotic that is more than 2 billion probiotics per serving, and add that serving to a quart of our milk after it's thawed. Shake it up and leave it on your counter for 24 hours, and you have your own fermented raw milk. And so the cool thing is there, you can rotate between probiotics. You can sort of if you have a probiotic that works really amazingly, you could use that probiotic and ferment it into that milk medium. You can also use, kefir from the grocery store. You could use yogurt from the grocery store as a starter. So it really just depends on what you want to do there. And the cool thing is, you get to make something for your dog, and it only takes 10 seconds, and then a day of waiting. So it's we wanted to be able to kind of cater to all animals, especially sensitive ones, and so that's where we got the releasing in pure form and then feeding it up to 3 different ways.
Yeah, super cool. I love that. Diane asked, how long can I keep the raw goat milk in the refrigerator?
2 weeks if it's not fermented, and then 30 days if it is fermented.
A customer asked, how do you know the goats are happy on the label on the milk?
Because I see every one of them, and they all are out on pasture, and when they're inside their enclosure have a ton of room and come up and ask to be pet and are fed the right things. And actually, last time I was out with our first goat farmer, Sam, he said, "Is there anything I can do better?" And I thought that was just very cool. I said, "No, your farm is amazing, and you're doing great here." And so that's kind of and plus check out our social media. I think there's some videos of them on there as well.
Super cool. All right, last question. Kelley, this one's for you. If you could add only 3 veggies, which ones would you pick?
Dandelion greens for sure. They are not only an excellent prebiotic, but they also stimulate the liver to detox better, which I think is, as we talked about earlier with the modern dog, super important. I think my next one would be our fermented beets. Also, like we talked about, beets they're really a superfood. They also are super important for the liver. Something that people may or may not realize, but dogs have so many allergies. Allergies are rooted in an overburdened liver. Livers are overburdened because of all of the toxins, stressors, chemicals, what's it called? Processed food, all of that stuff. So if we can support the liver more, then the whole body works better, including allergies. So with the fermented beets, we are reducing the sugar and oxalate content, and we're making it so that the beets are actually something very healthy for the dog. They also have 20 million CFUs per ounce of probiotics in them, so they're a good hit of probiotics as well. My third one is probably cilantro, because cilantro helps detox heavy metals, and it's also a very deep dark green, which has lots of chlorophyll and lots of antioxidants, anti-inflammatory, and very low carb.
None of those would I have guessed.
What would you have guessed?
I had no idea. I mean, it was an open thing, but you were ready for it. I love it. Would you add anything to those, Billy?
I thought that was a pretty good. I thought that was a pretty good list. I could plug Lewis Fermented Golden Paste because they're named after my dog, which I think are highly necessary for any animal dealing with whether they're a senior animal or dealing with cancer, kidney disease. Just very supportive in terms of antioxidants and also anti-inflammatory. So good way to help those animals as well.
Awesome. All right, we are just out of time. That was such a fun experience. Thank you guys again for joining us. For everyone else, we are doing a giveaway. So make sure you tune in. We're going to be choosing 3 winners to get a bag of, this is a new one, right? The Just Greens freeze-dried. I'm excited to feed this myself because I think our dog Icon will take to it a little bit better mixed into his food, being that it's dried and super convenient. And then we also have our meatballs. We've got a few different choices: turkey, beef, and pork meatballs, which come from our ancestral recipe. Includes grass-fed beef liver, green tripe, wild anchovies, and fur from our rabbit ears. So super exciting. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and thank you both for joining me.
Yes,
Thank you
so much.
appreciate it
See ya.